Imagine for a second that you are standing in a room. It is pitch black.
Okay.
I mean, just absolute suffocating darkness. You're holding your breath and you're forcing every single muscle in your body to remain perfectly statue still.
Right.
And you're doing this for an entire hour, just waiting. Why? Because, well, according to the logic we're exploring today, you have to prove that you are sane.
And apparently only a perfectly sane person has the patience to stand motionless for 60 minutes before committing a brutal murder.
It is a terrifying image when you really visualize it.
It is. It brings us right to the edge of one of the most famous paradoxes in all of literature. The narrator who screams, "I am not mad," while describing, in perfect logical detail, exactly how they dismembered a human body to hide it under the floor.
That paradox is exactly where we are living today. Welcome back to the deep dive. We are not just retelling a ghost story. We are unpacking the grandfather of psychological horror.
We are. We're looking at Edgar Allan Poe's The Telltale Heart.
But to keep things interesting, and to make sure we aren't just retreading high school English class, we are working off a fascinating stack of documents, specifically a 2024 digital edition published by the University of Colima.
This edition is a really great find. It's titled El Corazón del Later. And what makes this source unique for our purposes is that it pairs the story itself with a critical essay by Lucila Gutierrez Santana.
The Strange Case of Edgar Allan Poe.
Exactly. So we have the primary text of the confession, and we have a really sharp analysis of why this story still haunts us nearly 2 centuries later.
And the mission today is to figure out that why. We want to get into the narrator's head, which is a scary place to be, admittedly, and understand the mechanics of guilt.
And obsession.
And obsession. Plus, the source material has some incredible details about Poe's life and legacy that I frankly didn't know.
Well, before we get to the floorboards and the beating heart, we have to talk about the man himself. Because the essay opens with a quote that really puts Poe's influence into perspective. It comes from none other than Sir Arthur Conan Doyle.
The Sherlock Holmes guy.
The very same.
Yeah.
Conan Doyle once said that if every author who owed a debt to Poe paid just 1/10 of their royalties toward a monument for him, you could build a pyramid as tall as the Great Pyramid of Cheops.
Wow. That is a massive claim.
It is.
Basically saying the entire mystery genre is standing on Poe's shoulders.
Yeah.
But when you look at the resume provided in our source, it actually holds up. The essay lists him as the father of the detective novel, the novella negra, a precursor to science fiction.
And the guy who completely renovated the Gothic novel.
Right.
Absolutely. Without Poe, you don't have Sherlock Holmes. You probably don't have the modern psychological thriller either. The source mentions works like The Black Cat, The Pit and the Pendulum.
The Mask of the Red Death. He really created the template for the tortured genius and, crucial for today, the unreliable narrator.
And pop culture is still obsessed with him.
Oh, completely. The essay points out that everyone from Roger Corman in the 1960s to The Simpsons has riffed on his work. I think most people my age were introduced to The Raven by Lisa Simpson, right?
I think that's a fair bet. But here's where it gets really interesting for me. The source drops a little cocktail party fact about his death. Oh, I always heard the standard story. He died drunk in a gutter.
Yeah, me too.
But the essay notes suggest something way more specific and, well, medically intriguing.
Okay.
It's one of literature's great cold cases. Poe died at 40, and for a long time the theories were alcoholism, diabetes, even syphilis. But the source cites a more recent proposal from the University of Maryland Medical News.
And what's their theory?
They suggest Poe might have actually died from rabies.
Rabies? That seems incredibly random.
It sounds wild, I know, but it fits the clinical picture perfectly. Delirium, hallucinations, confusion, and a rapid, feverish decline. It's a tragic, chaotic end. But it feels strangely fitting for the man who wrote such chaotic, feverish stories.
It certainly adds a layer of grim reality to his fiction. Speaking of which, let's pivot to the story itself, The Telltale Heart. If you haven't read it since high school, the premise is simple but devastating. We have a narrator living with an old man. The narrator claims to love the old man, says he never did him any wrong, but he hates his eye.
The vulture eye.
That's the specific phrase. Pale blue with a film over it.
And what fascinates me here is the dissociation. The narrator says explicitly, "It was not the old man who vexed me, but his evil eye."
He separates the body part from the person.
Exactly. It allows him to justify the violence. He isn't killing a human being. He is removing an irritant. He's extinguishing a mal de ojo, or an evil eye.
It's objectification as a defense mechanism, and the way he justifies it. The hook of the story is that opening paragraph. Yep. Nervous. Very, very dreadfully nervous I had been and am. But why will you say that I am mad?
He argues that his disease hasn't destroyed his senses, but
Sharpens them.
sharpened them, especially his hearing. He says he can hear things in heaven and in earth and many things in hell.
Which should be the first, giant red flag that maybe he isn't the most reliable witness to his own sanity.
You'd think so. But the argument he makes is surprisingly compelling in a twisted way. Look how calm I am. Look how methodical I am. A madman would be messy. I was surgical.
So let's unpack that method, because the source text details this 7-night ritual that is honestly the stuff of nightmares. It's the patience that really gets under my skin.
It reverses the typical slasher trope where the killer strikes suddenly. This is slow.
Agonizingly slow. Every night at midnight, the narrator turns the latch of the old man's door. He says he opens it, oh, so gently.
And then?
And then he puts his head in, but not just pops his head in. He says it takes him an entire hour just to fit his head through the opening.
Think about that physical action for a moment. Moving your head so slowly that it takes 60 minutes to clear a door frame. The muscle control that requires. The obsession.
And he's doing this in total darkness because the old man keeps the shutters closed for fear of robbers.
Right, and the narrator has this dark lantern. The source calls it a linterna sorda, which is completely closed so no light escapes.
He gets his head in, and then he opens the lantern, just a tiny crack. A single, thin ray of light shoots out. And where does he aim it?
Straight at the eye. He wants to see the vulture eye.
But for 7 nights, the eye is closed. The old man is sleeping.
And because the eye is closed, the narrator can't do the deed. He can't kill the man because, again, in his twisted logic, he loves the man. He only hates the eye. If the eye isn't looking at him, the motive is gone.
It's this bizarre, rule set he's created for himself. It's almost a game. But then comes the 8th night.
The night everything goes wrong, or right, depending on your perspective.
The pacing shifts so dramatically here.
It really does. On the 8th night, the narrator is even more careful than usual. He says the minute hand of a watch moves faster than his hand was moving.
He is actually feeling a sense of triumph. He is giggling internally at the fact that he's standing there opening the door and the old man has no idea.
That hubris is the beginning of the end. And sure enough, a slip.
His thumb slips on the metal fastening of the lantern. It makes a clatter. And the old man springs up in bed and cries out, "Who's there?"
And this is the standoff. This is where the essay from the University of Colima really shines a light on Poe's understanding of fear. The narrator doesn't run. He doesn't attack immediately. He stands perfectly still.
For another whole hour.
Silence. Absolute silence. But he knows the old man hasn't gone back to sleep. He can hear him listening.
And then the old man lets out a groan.
And the narrator describes it not as a groan of pain, but a groan of mortal terror.
That part gave me chills reading it again. The narrator says, "I knew what the old man felt and pitied him, although I chuckled at heart." He recognizes the sound because he has felt it himself late at night.
It's a moment of shared humanity, just twisted by malice. The essay argues that Poe's characters are terrifying because they are fragile. We see our own fears reflected in them. The narrator knows exactly what that 3 a.m. existential dread feels like. He knows the old man is telling himself it's just the wind or it's just a cricket. But he knows that the old man knows death is in the room.
That is profound. Is that feeling when you wake up and the shadows look wrong and you try to convince yourself it's nothing, but your body knows something is off?
Precisely.
So the hour passes. The old man is terrified, waiting. The narrator finally decides to act. He opens the lantern, just a tiny, tiny crack, like a spider's thread of light, and it hits the bullseye.
The eye is open, wide open. The narrator sees that damn spot, that pale blue film, and instantly the love for the old man vanishes. The fury takes over.
And here's where the auditory hallucinations kick in, or is it hypersensitivity? He starts hearing a sound. He describes it as a low, dull, quick sound, like a watch wrapped in cotton.
That simile is so specific and so unsettling. A watch wrapped in cotton. Muffled, but rhythmic, persistent. He identifies it immediately as the beating of the old man's heart.
And he says it increased his fury, like the beating of a drum stimulates a soldier into courage. The sound gets louder and louder.
And he starts panicking.
Not about the moral weight of murder, but about the neighbors. He thinks the heart is beating so loud the neighbors are going to hear it through the brick walls.
Which creates this incredible tension. The internal logic is collapsing. He's worried about a sound that is likely physically impossible for a neighbor to hear, but to him, it is deafening. So he has to stop the noise.
The climax is brutal and fast. He bursts into the room with a yell. The old man shrieks once, just once. The narrator drags him to the floor and pulls the heavy bed mattress over him.
He essentially smothers him while crushing him.
And then the silence returns. The heart stops. The narrator puts his hand on the chest. No pulse. The old man is gone. The eye is gone. The problem is solved.
But then comes the cleanup.
And this is where the narrator tries to win us back over to his sanity argument. He is so proud of how he handled the body. He didn't just hide it. He made it disappear.
It's a gruesome efficiency. He dismembers the corpse in a tub head, arms, legs. The source specifically notes he was too wary to leave any blood.
Caught it all in the tub. Then he pries up 3 planks from the floorboards of the bedroom.
He deposits the remains into the hollow space between the beams.
Mm.
Then, and this is the detail that gets me, he replaces the boards so cleverly, so cunningly, that no human eye, not even his, could have detected anything wrong.
No nails loose, no stains. He says he used the tub for everything.
That laugh in the text is the crack in the armor.
Mm.
He thinks he has committed the perfect crime. It's 4 a.m, the work is done, and then
A knock at the door.
talk about narrative timing.
What was it?
3 police officers. A neighbor heard that one shriek during the attack and called it in.
So here's the narrator standing on top of a dismembered body with 3 cops at the door at 4 a.m. And what does he do? Does he run? Does he panic?
No, he invites them in. He is overflowing with confidence. He calls it wild audacity.
He tells them the shriek was his own, from a nightmare. He says the old man is away in the country. He takes them all over the house, bidding them to search well.
He even takes them into the bedroom.
Shows them the old man's gold is safe. And then, this is the moment of pure hubris, he brings chairs into the room. He tells the cops to sit down and rest.
And where does he put his own chair?
Right on the floorboards. Directly over the spot where the body is hidden. He is literally sitting on his victim, chatting with the police.
It's such a power move. And at first it works. The cops are convinced. They're chatting about familiar things. The narrator's answering cheerfully. But then the shift happens.
He starts to get a headache, a ringing in his ears.
He wishes they would leave. But they stay. And the ringing becomes more distinct. It becomes a definite sound.
He tries to talk louder to drown it out. He gets more animated, but the sound doesn't go away. The text says, I found that the noise was not within my ears.
That is the turning point. Reality is breaking. He realizes the sound is external, or at least he believes it is, and the description returns. A low, dull, quick sound.
Much such a sound as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. The heartbeat is back.
And it is getting louder. The narrator is gasping for breath, but the officers are still chatting, smiling. He can't understand why they don't hear it.
He starts pacing the floor. He foams at the mouth. He swears. He swings his chair around, grating it against the floorboards, the very boards hiding the body.
The irony is just suffocating. He's making all this noise to cover up the sound of the heart, but the heart is beating louder than his chaos.
And he comes to a terrifying conclusion. He thinks the police do hear it. He thinks they know everything and are just sitting there smiling to mock him.
That is the paranoia. The essay touches on this, the idea that his guilt is projecting onto the officers. He can't bear their smiles because he interprets them as derision or mockery. He thinks their calmness is a hypocritical trap.
He says, anything was better than this agony. Anything was more tolerable than this derision. He feels like he has to scream or die, and the sound is going louder, louder, louder.
And so he snaps.
Villains, he shrieks. Dissemble no more, I admit the deed. Tear up the planks. Here, here. It is the beating of his hideous heart.
And that's where the story ends, on that confession.
It is such an abrupt, high-energy ending. But let's bring in the essay again. Lucila Gutierrez Santana makes some really interesting points about why this story, which is basically a 19th century confession, still feels so modern and scary.
She argues that Poe removes the barrier between fiction and reality. The fictional reality of the narrator's psychosis lives within our real world. She draws a comparison to modern violence.
Yeah, that stood out to me. She mentions things like express kidnappings or street violence. She says reading the murder of the old man feels as close as witnessing a levanton, a kidnapping.
It's that feeling of sudden, intimate violence that you can't escape. It forces the reader to confront how thin the line is between civilization and brutality.
And she notes that we feel close to Poe because he appeals to our deepest, most common fears. Not just fear of monsters, but fear of debt, fear of guilt, fear of our own conscience.
She writes, "Who has not felt the fear of a debt, of a guilt stalking our mind, hovering as close as a pendulum?"
It grounds the horror. The narrator isn't a werewolf. He isn't a supernatural entity. He's a guy who cracked under the pressure of his own mind. He's Tremendously human, as the essay puts it.
Exactly. The essay suggests that Poe shows us how miserable and morally despicable humans can be, but also how fragile. We see ourselves in the narrator's weakness. We might not kill someone over an eye, but we understand the obsession.
We understand the intrusive thought that won't go away.
We understand the guilt that makes your heart race until you feel like everyone in the room can hear it.
So if we look at the big picture here, what is the takeaway? Why do we keep coming back to the telltale heart in 2024?
I think it's a story about the impossibility of hiding. You can hide the body. You can clean up the blood. You can fool the police. You can even fool yourself for a little while, telling yourself you're sane.
But you cannot hide from your own biology. You can't hide from your own pulse.
The perfect crime wasn't ruined by external evidence. It was ruined by internal collapse.
Precisely. The police didn't solve the case. They didn't find a fingerprint. They didn't find a weapon. The narrator solved it for them because his mind couldn't reconcile the reality of what he did.
It really makes you think about the nature of guilt. It's not just a feeling. It's a physical force in this story. It has a sound. It has a volume.
And that leads to the final question I always have when I read this, and it ties back to that ambiguity we talked about.
What's that?
We assume the sound he heard at the end was a hallucination of the old man's heart. But remember, the narrator describes himself as dreadfully nervous. He is full of adrenaline. He's pacing, shouting, terrified.
Okay. I see where you're going with this.
So was he hearing the ghost of the old man? Or, in that quiet room with his blood pressure skyrocketing, was he simply hearing his own heart beating so hard that it drove him to confess?
And if so, isn't that more terrifying?
Yeah.
That he was betrayed not by the dead, but by his own life force.
Wow. Betrayed by his own living heart. That is a thought that is going to keep me up tonight. It changes the whole story from a ghost story to a tragedy of the body.
Just don't listen too closely to the silence tonight.
I'll try not to. That's all for this deep dive into Edgar Allan Poe. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.